All right, I'd now like to welcome on a very special guest, a recurring guest on this show. It is Liam Blutman, now of Barstool Sports, since the last time you were on this show. Liam, what's going on?
What's up? Thank you for having me. Always enjoy being on here talking ball with you. Usually it's been football. I guess it's basketball this time, that time of the year.
Yeah. Usually it's football. And I was thinking about who to do the March Madness preview with. And one of the best things about March Madness is obviously the mid-majors, upsets, Cinderellas. I feel like that's kind of where you thrive.
Yeah, that's all I care
Uh,
about.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes we've done is when we did the group of 5 preview before this football season, and it accidentally ended up being like a 2.5 hour episode just talking group of 5 football. So
That's what
figured we
we
could
do.
don't have as much to say about college basketball as college football, but obviously March Madness, one of the best times of the year. Basically nonstop basketball for the next couple of weeks. This weekend, first weekend, is one of the best weekends. So just kind of wanted to run through some of the big storylines for this, give out some of our kind of best predictions and everything for how the tournament's going to go. I don't know. I feel like everybody's kind of exhausted the like bubble talk already, like who should be in, who shouldn't be in. I think there's plenty of fair arguments for some of those Big East teams, Seton Hall, maybe leaving out UVA and some of those teams. But I feel like that's kind of already been like beaten to death 24 hours after the bracket comes out. So just going to more focus on teams that are in, the teams that are playing. I do want to just talk about the first 4 really quickly, which is some of those bubble teams that we were talking about. UVA, maybe the most controversial team that got in that people didn't really want in, partially because of their resume and partially because people don't really want to watch UVA basketball. But I think it's important to talk about the play-in because obviously we've seen the last few years teams from the play-in. We saw UCLA make a Final Four run from the play-in. Last year, Fairleigh Dickinson, 16 seed in the play-in, who ended up beating Purdue. So a lot of these play-in teams have played pretty major roles. I don't know if we're going to see a 16 seed again. But the first game is Colorado State UVA. I was wondering if you had any feel on this game. I almost feel like because people are so against UVA, it's kind of setting up for them to win this game. That's kind of my vibe. What do you think about this?
The good thing about that is that's how I felt leading up to the ACC tournament and created this whole blueprint with Malsek that Virginia was going to win the ACC tournament. They're going to get on the 8-9 line, and they were going to be the 1 seed in the round 32, and everyone was going to be upset and up in arms that 1 seed is outraged that they had to play Virginia in the round 32. Like, that should be happening. I don't want to do this again. I'm exhausted after the slim amount of time I spent digesting Virginia hoops in the ACC tournament. I'm exhausted. They're 4-5 in their last 9. They haven't beat a tournament team since February 3rd when they beat a garbage Clemson team. Sorry, maybe not garbage. That Clemson team shouldn't be a 6 seed though.
Yeah, you can say that to me. That's fine.
I'm exhausted about Virginia, and they play a Colorado State team who shot the 3 ball as poorly as Virginia does, if not worse, when they got knocked out by New Mexico in the Mountain West tournament game. This game is going to be vile. It has 56-51 written all over it. I don't care who wins. I would prefer Colorado State wins. I would hope the winner also beats Texas. I'll be rooting for that. This is bad. That's a standalone game.
I know.
Sorry,
so obviously,
but
no, it's going to be ugly. And I just feel like that kind of ugly game sets up for UVA to win. And like I said, make everybody mad. And I wouldn't be surprised if UVA beat Texas. I don't like this Texas team at all. So if you're going to pick a playing team to win a game in the next round, that's very possible. One of those teams beats Texas. But speaking of Colorado State, I think another interesting storyline in this tournament is the Mountain West. There's been like a lot of hype around Mountain West basketball, and they got a few bids, more bids than the Big East is something that Big East people are complaining about. And now I feel like it's kind of been like a 50-50 split where there are people that love the Mountain West and love some of these teams. New Mexico, I know, is getting a lot of love. And then there's some people that are like, oh, the Mountain West has been so bad in the tournament for the past few years, outside of San Diego State last year was kind of the exception. So as a conference as a whole, where do you stand on these Mountain West teams?
Well, I know you didn't want to talk too much about the bubble or whatever, which is like fine. I have no issue with that. I'm more so wanting to say that the committee did an unbelievably bad job at figuring this out this year. And it's not just because BYU can't play on Sundays. That doesn't give them an excuse for an entire 68 team bracket plus the teams that got left out. This stuff was just, I don't even know what words to use to describe this because it was just, Ebo and I were talking about it today. It was just so puzzling. It was jumbled and out of place. Nothing really made sense except for possibly. Well, no, that didn't even make sense. Where the part of my take pod doesn't make sense because JMU shouldn't be a 12 if Duquesne's at 11. Now,
Mm-hmm.
sticking to the Mountain West thing, the storylines, or rather the topics from week to week with the Mountain West and who's going to be in stuff never made sense. Why New Mexico was always the team that was on the outside looking in never made any sense. You could argue that, that's been the best or second best team in the Mountain West the entire season. Like, their body of work speaks for itself. Their coaching's great. Shout out Richard Pitino. They have great guard play. They have really good bigs that help disrupt on that defensive interior, whatever, protect the paint. Like, they're a really well built team. They shoot the three well. They do things well offensively, defensively. The efficiency numbers are there. They're the top ranked team in the Mountain West on Bartorvik, who I love using.
Yeah.
So why New Mexico is getting an 11 seed? I don't know why they weren't going to be in the tournament if they didn't win the Mountain West. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why Nevada's a 10 seed instead of out of the tournament or even in Dayton? They should be in Dayton instead of Colorado State. Boise State shouldn't be in Dayton either. That didn't make sense. I believe the theory people are throwing out there about CBS gassing up the Mountain West, I believe it. The Mountain West didn't get respect in years past, and now all of a sudden it is. We had Jerry Palm saying Utah State was a 4 seed for him on Saturday.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was wild. I don't know, man. I don't know if San Diego State should have been at 5. I probably would have them slotted at 6. I just think they did a terrible job seeing these Mountain West teams.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I think, well, you have in the same. I was trying to pull up the bracket just as like a reference. I think that works. Yeah. So we were talking about New Mexico, and I think I agree that it seems like a tough seeding for them, but I think it actually kind of works out because
yeah,
we
it
were
does.
just
They
talking
got a
about
very good draw.
Clemson. Yeah, where Clemson is probably shouldn't be a 6 seed, and New Mexico shouldn't be an 11 seed in the other direction, which is why New Mexico's favored in this game. They're 2.5-point favorites, I think,
Yeah, I
last
think
time
New
I checked.
Mexico is going to win by 8+.
Yeah, which I have down as one of my favorite bets for this round is New Mexico, and I think they have a real shot to make it to the second weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other kind of group we were just talking about is this group all the way at the top with San Diego State. And this is kind of the whole group that's been, I feel like, kind of weirdly seeded because UConn, number 1 overall seed. And you can, I don't know, people have different theories on like number 1 overall seed. Should they have the easiest path or should there be the way it's set up, the overall seating is weird that the committee put out. Just like doesn't seem to be right because you have FAU was in the Final Four last year, 8 seed that some people thought would be in the play-in and are an 8
Why
seed, which
they're
is
an
kind of
8 is
bizarre.
bizarre.
Yeah,
There's no
them and
reason
San
they're an
Diego
8 based
State.
off reputation from last season. They completely checked out the entirety of conference play.
Yeah,
Like, you have to
yeah, it
punish
seems.
that stuff. They should be in Dayton.
Yeah, the FAU and San Diego State getting those 8 and 5 seeds there as kind of just respect for them being in the Final Four last year, and then you have an Auburn team that has been on fire and playing really good basketball, and then ends up the 4 seed. People thought they would maybe move up
Yeah, they should have been
to a
a 3.
3
They gotta
after.
stop playing. These conferences have to stop doing Sunday conference tournament championships. It doesn't ever work well.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you because people are like, oh, the committee, like, and again, this region seems to be the one that's the most weirdly seeded because you have Duquesne there too as the 11 seed,
What is
and
that?
people saying that it basically looks like the committee was like, oh, VCU would be an 11 seed, so we're just locking in the winner of that game
They decide
as
not
the
to make
11 seed.
like how do you not make like a second version of it if Duquesne wins? And the 8-10, Dayton shouldn't be a 7. The 8-10 is so bad that Duquesne won it twice on Sunday. Like, this conference stinks.
Yeah, and I had a friend who came to New York City who went to Richmond and is a Richmond fan, and he drove up to New York City on Thursday to watch the A10 tournament on the weekend, and Richmond goes out on Thursday while he's on the road on the way up. So sorry to him, but that is just the story of that conference, that all those top teams got knocked out early. And so, yeah, a lot of weird seeding. That's pretty off, but just getting into kind of where these big teams are, not as much about the seeding. I want to talk about the 1 seeds for a bit. Obviously, UConn, number 1 overall. And then we have Houston, Purdue, and UNC gets the last one. And so I believe the stat is 10 of the last 13 tournaments. A 1 seed has not made it to the Sweet 16. They've gotten knocked out by an 8 or a 9 seed in the round of 32. So when you look at these 4 1 seeds and kind of their path, where do you see that potential upset being between these or with the 1 seeds?
Yeah, want to take a wild guess where I'm going?
Probably Purdue.
Yeah, Zacky's out there. I've been silently trying to warn people that I think TCU could do something in March, and they got a very good draw, in my opinion, for a team on the 9 line, on the 8-9 line. They got a Utah State team with the Mountain West and their suspect history in the tournament. I'm not too big on Utah State this year. There are Mountain West teams I like this year, but Utah State's not going to be one of them. And then they get to drop Purdue. And TCU, they're top 40 in offensive and defensive efficiency. They shoot the 3 well. They play at a fast pace. And Purdue doesn't force turnovers. And TCU is a team who struggles turning the ball over. Well, if Purdue's not going to force turnovers, then that's going to help play into TCU's hand. TCU also forces turnovers pretty well. So I really like that. And if TCU could just get hot, make a few threes, get that momentum going, good stuff's going to happen. I like TCU to knock Purdue off in the round 32. And I don't know. Like, you're welcome, America. You don't have to watch
Yeah,
Edie Ball in the
I
second
know.
week.
The Big Ten tournament was just brutal to watch from the Zach Edey ball. It's like I watch a good amount of college basketball, especially once football season's over. I really go like fully into it. And obviously from watching last year, I already knew about Edey ball, and then but you see people like talking about it throughout the season, and it's like, can it really be that bad? And then you watch that Big Ten tournament, and it's like, oh, it's actually somehow worse than people even say it is.
Brandon Walker was kind of sat down with us this weekend and was kind of surprised, I think, at how much slander we were throwing to Zach Edey. And then he sat down and really locked in. And after about 5-6 minutes, he completely understood where we are all coming from. It just
Yeah.
it's vile, and I can't wait for TCU, a team with shooting speed and size, to knock Purdue off. I don't know what that line's going to be. I would guess Purdue would be like 7.5, 8 there. I would gladly take TCU.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't forget about TCU's miraculous backdoor cover last year against Gonzaga either.
I
They
know.
could also play in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I like that. Obviously, going against Purdue is not a bad idea. I like TCU on the short. I think they're 2.5 point favorites against Utah State around there. I like that. I think they get it done against Utah State and move on against Purdue. Just looking at the other one seeds, you have Houston against the winner of Nebraska, Texas A&M. Which I think Houston gets through there. I think Houston's just athletic enough and plays good enough defense and has the dudes to get through and survive an upset. I don't know about Houston going all the way, but through there, I like them. UConn, I think this is where UConn actually is a pretty easy draw against either that 8 or 9. I think they demolish FAU or Northwestern. So if you're looking for UConn to get upset, I would say it's not not yet. Definitely not that early. I think this would be the other interesting one outside of Purdue is North Carolina, just because North Carolina has had games this year where they just kind of don't show up and kind of
Mhm.
weird performances here and there.
That'd
Baycott
be a
gets into
fun
foul
matchup with
trouble,
Mississippi
and
State.
yeah, I think against Tolu Smith and Mississippi State could be really exciting, and I think Mississippi State wins that game. Do you agree?
Wins against Michigan State.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Michigan State's
so,
another team that has a ridiculous seeding based off reputation.
mhm. Yeah, another team that people didn't even know if they were going to get in, and instead of being in Dayton, they're a 9 seed, which is kind of crazy.
It's
But
fun
so that's
because Ohio State could have competed for Sweet 16 Elite Eight.
I know I was loving the Ohio State team down the stretch. I would have loved to see them in the tournament. They should have won that game and kept moving in the Big Ten tournament. But there are a couple teams that I mean, St. John's and Ohio State were probably two of the hotter teams in the country that just got knocked out, and we don't get to see and get some of these teams like Michigan State and UVA that nobody really wants to watch instead. So um, that is definitely a bummer. Um, but outside of those one seeds, let's talk a little bit about more the Cinderellas, the long shots, who we like. Um, I was thinking just double digit seeds that
Mm-hmm.
we like to make it to the second weekend. You always get a couple of those. The last few years, we've had at least one double digit seed that makes it to the Sweet 16. I'm kind of keeping the bracket up in this region intentionally because there's some spots I like here. But do you have a one or two double digit seeds that you like to make a run?
Yeah, I'll give one and then you give one. We could just kind of alternate.
Sure.
All right. So my first one, we kind of already talked about them a little bit. It's New Mexico. They are severely underseeded at an 11 seed. They've been severely disrespected all season long, pretty much. This team is going to give their opponents in the tournament fits. They play fast. They play really good offensive basketball. They play really good on the defensive end, and they limit turnovers. They force turnovers. They play elite 3-point defense. You don't want to be playing this team. And Clemson, who is overseeded, overrated, gets the unfortunate task of playing New Mexico right off the bat. And Baylor's going to beat Colgate. I mean, I guess there's a world where they don't, but nonetheless, Baylor, New Mexico is a really fun game, and I just like New Mexico against pretty much everyone. I would take New Mexico could run with Arizona if they were to match up in the Sweet 16, and I would like New Mexico's chances. Um, when we're trying to find these teams, every year we have, like you said, we have these teams who just wreak havoc and get out there, and they are the chaos. New Mexico could very easily be one of those teams. They have the makeup of it. They have good presence, paint protecting, like I mentioned earlier. Jalen House is their star player, who's you know could take over a game if need be. Mustafa Amzil's very good down low. Like Nelly Jr. Joseph is another good piece. They have JT Toppin, you have to mention. Like Dent. Like they have dudes everywhere. I haven't even mentioned like Jamal Mashburn Jr. Like that team is so good. So good luck to everyone who is in their way. That team could legitimately make the Final Four out of that region too. The West region stinks.
Yeah, it's a very easy region to pull upsets. When you look at the top seeds, Clemson not totally sold on, Baylor not totally sold on, Arizona has shown that they can go and lose to anybody at any time. Alabama is one of the easiest teams to upset if they're just having a bad shooting night. Anybody can beat them. And North Carolina, we've talked about, is probably the weakest one seed. So it is probably the wide open region. I think if Grand Canyon can beat St. Mary's, they could go on a bit of a run through this bracket. I think it's pretty wide open. And yeah, I like New Mexico too. In my bracket, I have them going to the Sweet 16 and losing to Arizona, but I think they could definitely hang in that game. The other team I want to talk about was Drake. I like this Drake team a lot. I don't like this Washington State team. So it's one of those matchups that sets up perfectly, just like the Clemson New Mexico game, where it's the team that's, well, I was going to say the favorite, but not the favorite because Drake is a 1.5, 2-point favorite in the game. But the team that's lower seeded is a team I don't like. The team that's higher seeded is a team that I wanted to kind of back anyways. We were kind of robbed of the Tucker DeVries storyline in last year's tournament. Had the game against Miami that Drake almost won, and then Miami obviously ends up going on a run through the tournament, and everything could have been completely different if that game just ended differently. But he is one of those guys that just kind of seems like built for March, built for the tournament. Obviously, he didn't play very well in that game last year and was pretty distraught about how everything went. So I think the whole storyline, I think once they beat Washington State, and if Tucker DeVries has a good game, that's going to become like a big story that the media kind of latches onto. Like, oh, here's a guy to start paying attention to, and is going to have a lot of hype going into that game against Iowa State, you would think, which is going to be a really tough game. Iowa State, some people were saying maybe should have taken the last one seed instead of UNC. Like, they're playing really, really good basketball, and they're a tough team to upset, where I think they do a lot of things well, and you can't just try to catch them on a bad night. You would really have to kind of outplay them. But I do like this Drake team, and I think when you look at teams that could go on a run and kind of pull off a few upsets in a row, you want them to have a guy like Tucker DeVries that can go get you 30 and can go make a shot from anywhere on the court and kind of just carry a team through. So what do you think about Drake in this spot?
I like Drake a lot. I wanted to me Tyus and Jake Marsh on Tyus' show yesterday are like first instant reactions to bracket and everything. We all had Drake in the Elite Eight.
Ooh, 3 for 3 in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, we
I
all had
like
Drake in
that.
the Elite Eight. Tucker DeVries, CBB Analytics tweeted this out earlier. Leading scores against quad one opponents among the field, Tucker DeVries, while it's just 5 games, he averages the most points against Q1 opponents with 25 25.8. Next is Zach Edey at 25.3 in 16 games. Tucker DeVries is a dog, and this Drake team, they've been this program. They've been here before. They're very well coached, and they have a bitter taste in their mouth. That Miami game is still drilled in these kids' heads, and they're looking for redemption. They're hungry, and they're going to make something happen. This could be one of those special teams. I think it's a really unique year in this bracket where, again, so much was done wrong by the committee. They did almost nothing right. A lot of the mid-major matchups just aren't there in the first round, in my opinion. But a few teams got really good draws, and I think Drake is one of them. I think Drake could do something special, possibly Loyola Chicago-esque. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. No, I like them too, and also in this bracket, if you're thinking like long shot, because obviously some of these teams we're talking about, like New Mexico and Drake, are favored to win their first round matchup, so it's not like it would be that crazy. Obviously, they won't be favored in their round of 32 game, but I think an interesting team and what could be a really exciting game is Morehead State against Illinois. Morehead State kind of ran through their conference tournament, and they have another kid like we're talking about with Tucker DeVries and Riley Minix, who just went off and kind of dominated through their whole conference tournament. And Illinois is a team that we've seen go into the tournament, and people have different opinions on, like, oh, with Purdue and with Rick Barnes at Tennessee, like, oh, this guy doesn't win in March. And I think sometimes those assessments can be kind of harsh because, like, at the end of the day, only one team wins every year out of 68. Like, it's hard to get two on a coach. Like Tony Bennett was the guy who didn't win in March, and then until he won a national championship. Like, there are guys like this that kind of have these bad reputations and sometimes unfair, but I think Brad Underwood has shown to be one of those coaches that can be upset in the tournament, and kind of his attitude and the way he coaches, like, kind of insane and yelling and going crazy. And in like a close tournament game, like, guys on the court are flustered. You look over at your coach and he's like screaming his head off, and you're like, what's going on? And then you have a team like Morehead State and a guy like Riley Minix that's just lighting you up. And I think you could see some panic from Illinois. So I like that spot. I bet Morehead State plus 13.5. It's now down to 11.5. So it's obviously been somewhat of a popular pick, at least against the spread. So I like Morehead State to keep that game close. Obviously, that would be a massive upset. But do you have anything on Morehead State before we move on?
I was in on Morehead State. I'm not sure if I love the draw they got. I was I also, like, again, I don't think this team should be a 14. I don't understand anything that this committee was doing. This team really should have been on the 13 line. Give them a better opportunity to pick someone off. They played a tough non-conference schedule. They played Alabama. They played Purdue. They played Penn State. They lost to Indiana by like 1. They play, again, they do what you want, right? They play well on both sides of the ball. They take the 3 away. They don't give you good looks, and they take a lot of threes. They're 25th, I think. They're like top 25 in 3-point rate. Khalil Thomas is a big shot taker and maker. Like, they do what you want. I don't know. I just don't know how they match up against Illinois. They have to dictate the pace. Morehead State wants to grind games out. They play very slow. If Morehead State gets that snail's pace kind of game and they set the tone here and they're making their threes, something can happen. Yeah, I just feel like Illinois is going to set the pace, though, and kind of run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always the worry in those games that are completely conflicting style, is usually whoever can dictate the pace ends up winning. But that's how we've seen teams like Alabama struggle in the tournament, and teams like that is teams that want to go 100 miles an hour and take 100 shots. And if they can't do that, then they start to really panic and get behind and don't know how to play from behind. So we'll see. I think I don't know. Is there anywhere else on the bracket that you want to look at before we go to kind of Final Four predictions and more like Final Four predictions, I guess.
Yeah, I have one. I really like Grand Canyon. I'd be foolish not to shout them out. And James Mass, obviously. Um, I think Grand Canyon can make the Sweet 16, but I want to put focus on Oregon. I'm sorry for going there of all places, but
I know.
Oregon's going to be a dangerous 11 seed, and that's a team that I think would also get rid of Creighton. And then you're looking at Oregon, Tennessee in the Sweet 16. Like Oregon could also make a run to the Elite Eight. They're playing their best basketball right now. Dana Altman always figures it out, and I don't like. There's just something about Oregon that I think I fell in love with this week in Vegas.
Yeah, I personally hated the draw when it came out. Some of my friends that I went to South Carolina with who don't watch as much college basketball were like, I think that draw seems fine. Like I don't think Oregon had that good of a season, and they didn't have that good of a regular season. They needed a huge performance in the Pac-12 tournament to get here. But South Carolina, if me being unbiased, they are a team that's kind of ripe for an upset in March because they're a team that overperformed all regular season pretty much. I mean, as a fan of the team, I'm really happy with how the season went. It was a really fun season for the first time in a few years. It was a fun South Carolina basketball season, and locking up Lamont Paris on a long-term contract is huge because I think he's a ridiculously good coach, and keeping him around for the future is really positive, but it is a really tough draw. Dana Altman in March always seems to find a way, and the way South Carolina played in the SEC tournament, obviously Auburn is a much better team than Oregon, but just seemed to be kind of flat, and it kind of worries you going into this that all the regular season overperformance will catch up to you eventually. But actually, let's just go through first round really quick. We've already talked about most of it, but if you had to pick just one upset, it doesn't need to be betting odds, but just seeding wise, one upset that you had to pick that you're most confident in, what would it be?
New Mexico, but I wouldn't really consider it that. Plus, they're favored. So,
yeah,
an underdog, I think Grand Canyon. I'm not in on St. Mary's or Gonzaga this year. I think Gonzaga kind of got a joke of a draw. I didn't really like them or Kansas coming in, and I don't know, I'm not too afraid of McNeese State or Samford, to be completely honest. I know a lot of people are big on those teams. I'm completely off them. I was, man, yeah, I don't know. I go with Grand Canyon and probably Charleston because I think Charleston and Rain Smith could run. They could run with Alabama and keep up the pace and the tempo. I mean that Alabama plays the exact kind of ball that Pat Kelsey wants to play, right? So Charleston could definitely pick Alabama off. We could very well be looking at a GCU CFC around the 32 game winner goes to the Sweet 16, possibly facing North Carolina. I would sign up for that. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, get New Mexico and Grand Canyon into the Sweet 16 in that
Let's
bracket.
get a New
Seeding 12.
Mexico Grand Canyon Elite Eight.
Yeah, that would look something like this. Yeah, I like that right there. That looks really nice. I wrote down my favorite round of 64 upset, Grand Canyon over St. Mary's. So I agree with you there. I bet Grand Canyon +5. I also had Grand Canyon +5 written down as one of my favorite bets of the round of 64. So we agree on that spot. We agree on New Mexico, like those spots a lot. I think Alabama will end up holding on in that game. But I did bet Charleston plus 10.5, and I bet the over in that game, which is like the most public over of the entire round. But I don't even care. Like, there's no way you can bet an under in that game that those two teams are going to play, because it's just going to be ridiculous up and down, like you said. So since you said Grand Canyon, well, just talking about these teams real quick, because we haven't talked about them yet. You were just talking about Kansas and Gonzaga and this kind of region. It is weird because, like you said, Purdue's ripe for an upset. You think TCU could take them down there, and South Carolina could potentially go down. And this whole, we talked about Texas losing, so this whole bracket could kind of open up and be the bracket that we see a lot of chaos in. And I agree. I think McNeese is one of the trendy underdogs. There's two or three super trendy underdogs that McNeese is one that I'm not in on. I think Will Wade already is like halfway out the door, ready to go get a job somewhere else. I think he's
confirm,
and you can confirm. And so I think Gonzaga is going to win that game. I think Kansas probably squeaks it out, just because I think Kansas would be ripe for an upset if they had gotten a different draw, but I just don't think Samford is going to be able to do it. And then I would take Gonzaga over Kansas, honestly. So could be interesting, where I also don't love this Gonzaga team, but if they're playing TCU in the Sweet 16, we could say it's not a great Gonzaga team that kind of ends up in the Elite Eight anyways. And Mark Few just kind of finds a way to win games in the tournament. Then looking at any other big upset spots, James Madison, I bet against the spread. I think they'll have a good chance to win that game. But so let's go into just Final Four prediction and national champion prediction. I can go first. I have my Final Four. It's honestly not that interesting. I do think UConn gets through the East. Super chalky, but they've been best team in the country the whole season. They've been the best team in the country for a reason. Defending national champions. I think they just roll. I think they had a somewhat tough bracket, but I think they do get past Auburn, and then end up cruising past whoever they see, whether it's Iowa State or Drake potentially, or Illinois or whoever. They get past in the Elite Eight and get to the Final Four. And then I like in the West, I like Arizona. If Arizona can beat New Mexico, I think the winner of Arizona, New Mexico makes it to the Final Four, because I do not believe in UNC. I think they could lose to Mississippi State. I think they could lose to Grand Canyon, like we have in our kind of dream bracket here. But in my final bracket, I am going with Arizona there. Very reluctantly, in the South, I'm actually going with Kentucky, a team we haven't talked about. I think Kentucky could lose to Oakland in the first round, which is why it's very scary to pick them to go to the Final Four. And I don't really know why I'm doing it, but I'm not in on this Marquette team. Tyler Kolek's health is still a bit up in the air. I think he plays going into the tournament, but he's not 100%. And I think Texas Tech beats NC State, but I don't love this Texas Tech team. I think Kentucky will get by them and get to that game against Marquette. And like I said, I think they beat Marquette. So then Kentucky would end up playing Houston or Duke or whoever you think comes out of the top half of that bracket. So I think Kentucky, even though they're a team that can't really be trusted, finds a way into the Final Four. And then in the final region, I'm going with Creighton to get to the Final Four. I think they're the most reliable team in this bracket. We were just talking about how it's a bracket full of teams kind of ripe to be upset. Purdue, Gonzaga, Kansas, South Carolina, Texas, and Tennessee. Every other top seed are teams that personally I feel like I can't really trust. Mm-hmm. They have Kalkbrenner. They have just massive size inside. They have guys that can score outside. So they're just the only team when I look at the top 8 seeds in this bracket that I feel like I can actually trust. So that's who I'm rolling with out of that bracket. And then I have national championship game. I think UConn repeats. Super boring. It's who everybody's picking. But I just think they are that much better than everybody else. And I have UConn beating Kentucky in the national championship.
Yeah, I personally really need to do some surgery on my bracket and reconstruct the monstrosity I started with. The first run through is the only one I've had, and it has I say this with some regret. It has a Final Four of UConn, UNC, Tennessee, and Florida.
All right. I thought it was going to be worse. I thought you were going to say New
Oh no no no
Mexico
no!
and
It might. I got dangerously close to UConn, New Mexico, Tennessee, Florida.
yeah, Tennessee's interesting because I think Dalton Connect is one of those guys that could carry a team all the way through to the Final Four. I think they've shown that they can hang with anybody, but it's that thing that I was talking about earlier with Brad Underwood. Like there are these coaches that get labeled with this thing like Rick Barnes of like, oh, you just can't trust him. And everybody's that guy until they're not. So this could be the year that Tennessee makes a run. But I agree. I should say the same thing that the Final Four and national champion I just said is completely subject to change up until noon on Thursday.
Yeah, I think Florida's completely fine without Micah playing. I mean, Tyree Samuel and Condon are just gonna eat the glass anyway, so it's whatever. It's a luxury of them having had three very capable big men, and Walter Clayton can take over a game whenever he wants, and those are the stars that are made in March. He already had the incredible SEC tournament, so people are going to like him. I will say though, in that region, you mentioned Texas Tech. I actually kind of like Texas Tech as well. I'm not thrilled that them and Florida are in the same region. I could have seen both of them making runs.
Mm-hmm. No, I think NC State. Speaking of Texas Tech, that NC State Texas Tech matchup is another one that I think NC State, just because they got so much love through the ACC tournament, is going to be a trendy underdog pick for people to make. But I think Texas Tech gets through that game. I think NC State is kind of had their peak
Cinderella
of their
already
season
happened.
already, and
Mhm.
ready to get knocked out.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of teams like that in the past, so I like Texas Tech there.
Yeah, I think like genuinely think I I want to change. 'Cause I don't know what to do, man. I don't know what to do. I
No, this
genuinely
is
think Texas Tech could make the Final Four.
that's what this week is for. This week is for constantly talking about these games a million times, going back and forth on what you think's going to happen. Teams that you thought maybe would get upset in the first round could actually go all the way to the Final Four if they somehow survived the first round, and Final Four teams that could actually get upset in the first round. That's what it's all about. It's going through these for the next couple of days. So obviously, we're recording this on Monday night. A lot of these things could change by Thursday. But just to finish off, I just wrote down my 5 favorite bets for the round of 64. And they are Grand Canyon +5 against St. Mary's. We've talked about that already. I think Grand Canyon can easily win that game outright. Morehead State +12.5. I think the outright upset could be tough, but I think they hang with Illinois. Drake -1. It's now out to -2. I still like it against Washington State. New Mexico -2.5 against Clemson. We talked about, and then I think one roll spot where I like a big favorite is Baylor -13 against Colgate. I think Colgate stinks, and Baylor is super athletic and will just be able to run up and down the court and basically put up whatever number they want and blow out Colgate. So I like them -13.
It's very unfortunate that Vermont, Colgate, and South Dakota State are all putting out probably the worst teams that they've had in the tournament in recent memory. All at the same time. I mean, they're worst versions of their team. brutal.
Do you have any bets you like, or do you want to just wrap there?
You and I are really on the same page for a lot of this. Like a lot. I like Oregon, whether it's +1 or money line. I like them a lot. I like Nevada a lot. -1 or money line. Don't really care. It's a fade the A10, fade Dayton play. I would gladly take New Mexico. I would gladly take Gonzaga -6. You signed me up for that. Texas Tech -5 too. Drake, I would take. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of the. What was one of the other ones? Grand Canyon. Forget the spread. Money line, straight up winner. Florida, whatever spread they're getting. I don't care who they're playing. Colorado or Boise State. I would take them. Probably the Nebraska A&M over 147. I think is good. Tominaga is going to put on a show. Everyone's going to love that. Ideally, we could get Tominaga into the second weekend.
I love that.
I mean, James Madison's numbers come down. TCU -3. Yeah, I would take that as well. I don't know. I hope that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this was great. Thanks for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I don't know. Just Barstool stuff. Woo.
Yeah, just pay attention. You'll see Liam around. You'll be on Unnecessary Roughness in the fall. That was the big news, and I'm sure you and I will talk college football once we get closer to that. So thanks for coming on. And yeah, everybody check out everything Liam's doing. Make sure you like this, subscribe to the channel here. And yeah, it's March. Best time of the year. Everybody enjoy it, and see ya.
See ya.